You think I'm handsome?" The deep voice cut through the silence like a blade drawn across stone. Every servant in the royal study froze. Every guard lowered his eyes. Emily Carter felt the blood drain from her face as the towering Alpha King slowly turned toward her. His silver eyes locked onto hers with terrifying precision, and for one impossible heartbeat, the entire palace seemed to stop breathing. She had whispered the words without thinking, barely louder than a breath. Yet somehow, he had heard every syllable. The corners of his mouth did not move. His expression remained carved from winter itself. Then he took one deliberate step forward. Emily's pulse thundered inside her ears. 6 hours earlier, the carriage wheels rattled over the uneven stone road leading toward Blackwood Citadel. Emily sat quietly in the corner, clutching the small leather satchel that held everything she still owned. Outside, the fortress emerged through the morning mist, its black towers reaching into the pale sky like ancient claws. It looked less like a palace and more like a prison built for kings. Only yesterday, she had stood beneath the sacred moon altar before her entire pack. Only yesterday, the man destined to become her mate had looked directly into her eyes and rejected her without hesitation. The words still echoed through every corner of her mind. "I reject you." The bond had shattered. The laughter that followed hurt even more than the magic itself. They called her a defective Omega, a burden, a mistake the moon goddess should never have created. No one stepped forward afterward. No one offered comfort. By sunrise, she had already been sent away to serve as a temporary archive assistant inside the royal palace, a position reserved for unwanted wolves with nowhere else to belong. Emily rested her forehead against the cold carriage window. She had promised herself she would not cry again. Tears had accomplished nothing yesterday except entertain people who already believed she was worthless. If fate insisted on leaving her alone, then she would simply learn how to survive alone. The gates of Blackwood Citadel groaned open. Rows of royal guards stood perfectly still in polished obsidian armor, each carrying the crest of the Alpha King upon his breastplate. No one smiled. Even the servants walked quietly, speaking only in careful whispers. Stories about the king floated through every hallway like invisible ghosts. They said he had defeated rival alphas before reaching 30. They said his wolf was so powerful that lesser wolves instinctively lowered their heads when he entered a room. They said no Luna had ever remained beside him. Some claimed he had never loved anyone. Others insisted he was incapable of love altogether. Emily wanted nothing to do with any of it. She only needed work, shelter, and enough distance to allow her wounded heart to heal. A senior housekeeper led her through endless corridors lined with towering bookshelves, marble statues, and stained glass windows that painted shifting colors across the floor. "Keep your eyes lowered whenever His Majesty passes," the woman instructed quietly. "Do your work. Speak only when spoken to. Above all else, never attract the king's attention." Emily nodded immediately. That sounded easy enough. Remaining invisible had become the one thing she truly excelled at. They stopped outside the royal archives, where ancient ledgers covered nearly every wall from floor to ceiling. Dust drifted lazily through beams of afternoon light. Emily exhaled softly. Books were simpler than people. Books never laughed when your world collapsed. She reached for the first stack of records just as distant footsteps echoed through the corridor. Heavy, measured, powerful. Every servant instantly straightened. The housekeeper's face turned pale. "Eyes down," she whispered urgently. Emily obeyed without hesitation. But curiosity was a dangerous thing. As the footsteps drew closer, she made the smallest mistake of her life. She glanced up for only a single heartbeat and saw the most striking man she had ever laid eyes on. The man moved through the corridor with the effortless authority of someone the world had learned to fear long before he ever spoke. Every servant bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the marble floor. Even the royal guards, warriors whose names inspired respect across the Northern Territories, lowered their gazes in silent acknowledgement. Emily quickly dropped her own eyes, ashamed she had looked at him at all. Yet the image refused to leave her mind. Broad shoulders hidden beneath a perfectly tailored black military coat. Dark hair brushed neatly away from a face so striking it seemed sculpted rather than born. Sharp cheekbones, a powerful jaw, and those impossible silver eyes that carried neither warmth nor cruelty, only absolute control. The footsteps faded beyond the corridor. Only then did everyone breathe again. "You looked at him," whispered a young maid beside Emily, her face pale as linen. Emily swallowed. "Only for a second. Never do that again." The girl's voice trembled. Most people cannot even endure his gaze. Before Emily could ask another question, the senior housekeeper clapped her hands. Back to work. The royal archives consumed the rest of the afternoon. Shelves climbed toward vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Ancient treaties, bloodline records, military journals, and centuries-old royal decrees filled endless rows of weathered leather bindings. Emily carefully sorted stacks of documents according to fading labels, while dust floated lazily through shafts of golden sunlight. It was peaceful work. Quiet work. Exactly what she needed after the nightmare of yesterday. Hours passed without conversation. Every so often distant footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the archive halls, followed by whispers that immediately vanished. Nobody spoke loudly inside Blackwood Citadel. The palace itself seemed to demand silence. As evening approached, the senior archivist handed Emily a small bundle wrapped in crimson ribbon. His Majesty requested these genealogy records before tonight's council meeting. Emily instinctively looked around. Should I leave them outside? The elderly archivist shook his head. The king accepts documents directly. Emily's stomach tightened. Me? You organized them. He offered a sympathetic smile that somehow made her feel even more nervous. Follow the western corridor. The royal study is the last door. She nodded despite every instinct urging her to refuse. Carrying the bundle carefully against her chest, Emily walked through unfamiliar corridors illuminated by crystal lamps. Portraits of former Alpha Kings watched silently from dark wooden walls. Some appeared noble, others looked merciless. Yet every painting seemed less intimidating than the living king she had glimpsed only hours earlier. The western corridor was strangely empty. No servants, no advisors, only silence. At the very end stood a pair of enormous black oak doors decorated with the royal crest, a silver wolf beneath a full moon. Emily paused outside, inhaling slowly. 3 gentle knocks. Enter. The voice came from inside. Calm, deep, controlled. She pushed the heavy door open just enough to step inside. The royal study was larger than most homes she had ever seen. Shelves filled every wall from floor to ceiling. Maps covered an enormous table near the windows. A fireplace burned softly despite the pleasant weather, casting warm amber light across polished wood and dark stone. Standing near the far window, his back turned toward her, was the Alpha King. Damian Blackwood studied several reports spread across his desk without acknowledging her arrival. Even from behind, he radiated an overwhelming presence that made the air itself feel heavier. Emily kept her eyes respectfully lowered. Your Majesty, the archive records you requested. Bring them here. His voice remained even, almost gentle, yet impossible to ignore. She crossed the room slowly, each heartbeat louder than the last. As she placed the documents upon the desk, Damien reached for the uppermost file. Their hands never touched. Still, Emily caught the faint scent drifting from him. Winter pine, snow, fresh rain over dark forests. It was unlike anything she had ever known. Before she realized she was speaking, the thought escaped her lips in the softest whisper imaginable. He's unbelievably handsome. She froze the instant the words left her mouth. The room fell into absolute silence. Damien's hand stopped turning the page. Slowly, impossibly slowly, the Alpha King lifted his head. Damian Blackwood did not move. The silence stretched so long that Emily wondered if the entire world had simply stopped. The crackling fire seemed impossibly loud. A single ember drifted upward inside the hearth before disappearing into darkness. Then, with deliberate slowness, the Alpha King turned to face her completely. His silver eyes settled on hers, unreadable and terrifyingly calm. Emily's heart nearly stopped. What? He asked quietly. Did you just say? Heat rushed into her cheeks. Every lesson about palace etiquette vanished from her mind. Her voice caught in her throat. I didn't mean. Damien waited. He neither raised his voice nor stepped closer, yet the invisible pressure surrounding him intensified until breathing itself became difficult. Emily lowered her eyes immediately. Forgive me, Your Majesty. Her fingers tightened around the empty ribbon she still held. I spoke without thinking. Another silence. Somewhere outside the study, distant footsteps echoed before fading away again. The palace remained eerily still, as though even its walls were listening. "Look at me." His command was calm. Not loud, not cruel, simply impossible to disobey. Emily slowly lifted her gaze. For the first time, she found herself standing only a few feet from the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories. Up close, he looked even more unreal. His face carried the cold perfection of carved marble, yet there was nothing lifeless about him. Beneath that flawless control rested restrained power, like a storm trapped beneath frozen water. Those silver eyes searched hers with unsettling patience. "You call me handsome." It was not a question. Emily wanted the floor to open beneath her feet. "Yes, Your Majesty. Most wolves cannot look at me for more than a heartbeat." His voice remained steady. "Many avoid my presence entirely." Emily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "Why?" She blinked in confusion. "Because I spoke out of turn." Damien studied her a moment longer. His wolf stirred beneath the perfect mask he wore before the kingdom. He had felt fear countless times from those around him. Ambition, hatred, greed, submission. But the young Omega standing before him carried something unexpectedly different. Embarrassment, certainly. Nervousness, undeniably. Yet beneath both, emotions lingered, an innocent sincerity untouched by calculation. She had not flattered him to gain favor. She had not recognized the political weight of speaking so casually to a king. She had simply spoken the first honest thought that crossed her mind. That realization unsettled him more than it should have. Emily lowered her eyes again, unable to endure his gaze any longer. "If I've offended Your Majesty, I'll gladly accept whatever punishment the palace requires." A faint breeze slipped through the half-open window, carrying the scent of pine forests after fresh snowfall. Damien noticed it at the exact same moment his wolf did. No, not the forest. Her. A delicate fragrance drifted toward him from the trembling Omega. Soft wildflowers after spring rain. Warm honey. Fresh moonlight upon white lilies. It was impossibly faint, almost hidden, yet unlike any Omega scent he had encountered in his entire life. His wolf surged forward so violently that his heartbeat skipped. "Mine." The ancient instinct exploded through his mind without warning. Damien's fingers curled tightly against the edge of the desk. Impossible. She had been rejected. The palace records delivered that morning clearly identified Emily Carter as a discarded Omega whose bond had already been severed. There should be nothing remarkable about her. Yet every instinct inside him demanded otherwise. "Mine." The possessive growl echoed again beneath his carefully maintained control. Emily noticed the subtle change immediately. The temperature inside the study seemed to rise. The air became heavier, vibrating with invisible power. Her own Omega instincts, long buried beneath humiliation and rejection, suddenly awakened. Tiny goosebumps spread across her pale arms. Her pulse raced for reasons she could not explain. Damien took one slow step toward her. Emily instinctively stepped back. Another step. Another retreat. Neither of them spoke. The distance between them continued shrinking until Emily felt the cold wooden surface of the study door pressed gently against her back. She looked up just as Damien stopped inches away, his silver eyes burning with an intensity that no longer resembled calm curiosity. Somewhere deep inside Blackwood Citadel, the Alpha King's wolf finally stopped whispering. It roared. The roar never escaped Damien's lips. It detonated inside his soul instead. "Mine." The single word crashed through every barrier he had spent years building, shaking the perfect discipline that had made him the strongest alpha on the continent. Emily felt it before she understood it. A wave of invisible pressure swept through the room, carrying the overwhelming authority of an alpha whose wolf had suddenly awakened. Her knees weakened. Her breathing became uneven. Every instinct told her to run, yet her feet refused to move. Damien closed his eyes for one brief second, fighting the primal command echoing through his blood. This could not be happening. A rejected Omega could not possibly trigger a true mate response. The ancient bond should have been impossible. When he opened his eyes again, they seemed brighter, the silver almost glowing beneath the firelight. Emily's pulse hammered painfully against her ribs. She had never experienced an alpha's aura at full strength before. It was not merely intimidating. It was consuming. The air itself felt thick enough to touch, wrapping around her like unseen hands. "Your Majesty." she whispered, barely able to find her voice. Please. Damien took another slow breath, forcing himself back under control. No one else has ever called me handsome. Emily stared at him in disbelief. Surely that could not be true. Kings were admired by everyone. Women across every pack must have dreamed of standing beside him. Yet there was no trace of arrogance in his voice. Only quiet certainty. I wasn't trying to flatter you, she admitted honestly. I know. His answer came without hesitation. That's why it mattered. Those words confused her even more. Before she could respond, Damien abruptly turned away and walked toward the massive oak door. Emily watched him in silence, believing the conversation had ended. Instead, his large hand settled on the iron handle. Click. The unmistakable sound of a heavy lock echoed through the study. Emily's eyes widened. She instinctively looked toward the only exit, then back at the Alpha King. Your Majesty. Damien remained facing the door for several long seconds, his broad shoulders rising and falling with measured breaths. He was not locking her inside to frighten her. He was locking everyone else out. Outside, 2 royal guards approached the study carrying additional council documents. The moment they reached the entrance, Damien spoke without raising his voice. No interruptions. Yes, Your Majesty. Both guards answered immediately before retreating down the corridor. Silence returned. Emily's heartbeat grew faster. Did I do something wrong? Slowly, Damien faced her once more. There was no anger in his expression, no cruelty, only a fierce internal struggle she could not understand. If anyone enters this room now, he said quietly, they will misunderstand what is happening. Emily frowned. I don't understand. Neither do I. It was the first time Damien Blackwood had ever admitted uncertainty aloud. His wolf paced violently beneath his calm exterior, demanding that he cross the remaining distance, breathe in her scent, claim the fragile Omega standing only a few steps away. Mine. The instinct struck again with unbearable force. Damien clenched both hands behind his back until his knuckles turned white. Emily noticed the tension immediately. Despite her fear, something unexpected stirred inside her heart. He was struggling, not against her, but against himself. Whatever invisible battle raged inside the Alpha King, he was doing everything possible to keep her safe from it. The realization softened the terror in her chest. She cautiously lifted her eyes to meet his again. You're trying not to scare me. Damien said nothing. His silence confirmed everything. For the first time since arriving at Blackwood Citadel, Emily saw something beyond the terrifying legend everyone feared. She saw a lonely man carrying the unbearable weight of absolute power. Then the scent between them intensified without warning. Warm honey, white lilies beneath moonlight, fresh pine after winter snow. Their fragrances intertwined in the still air, forming something entirely new. Damien's control shattered for a single heartbeat. His wolf surged forward, and a deep, possessive growl finally escaped his chest. Mine. The word rolled through the locked study like distant thunder, and Emily felt an unfamiliar warmth bloom beneath the fading scar of the bond that had once been broken. Sua, Emily's breath caught the instant the words settled between them. Mine. It was not shouted. It was spoken with quiet certainty, yet it carried enough power to send a tremor through every instinct buried inside her. The warmth blooming beneath the scar of her broken mate bond spread through her chest, confusing her even more. That scar should have remained empty forever. Rejected Omegas did not feel bonds awaken again. They certainly did not react to the Alpha King himself. She instinctively pressed a trembling hand against her heart. No, she whispered. That can't be happening. Damien heard every word. He took one slow step backward instead of forward, forcing distance between them before his wolf could erase it completely. Every muscle in his body screamed to close the gap, to breathe in her scent again, to touch her, to confirm what every primal instinct already believed. But Damien Blackwood had ruled for years because he mastered himself before he mastered anyone else. Look at me, he said quietly. Emily raised her eyes. His expression had returned to its familiar calm, but she could now recognize the strain beneath it. Tiny lines of tension framed his jaw. His breathing was measured with almost unnatural precision. He was fighting something powerful enough to frighten even him. Has anyone ever told you your scent changes when you're frightened? He asked. Emily blinked. My scent. She lowered her gaze in embarrassment. Ever since the rejection ceremony, most alphas barely notice I'm there. Damien's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. They're blind. The answer escaped him before he could stop it. Emily stared at him, speechless. Damien inhaled once more, immediately regretting it. The fragrance surrounding her had grown richer. White lilies, warm honey, a trace of fresh rain drifting across spring meadows. Beneath it all lingered something older, something impossibly ancient that stirred memories. Carried not by the man, but by the wolf inside him. Mine. His wolf repeated the claim with relentless certainty. Damien silently refused it, not because he doubted the instinct, but because accepting it too quickly could destroy the frightened woman standing before him. Tell me about yesterday, he said instead. Emily looked away. There's nothing worth telling. I decide what's worth hearing. She hesitated before giving a faint, defeated smile. I stood before the moon altar with the man everyone believed was my destined mate. Her fingers tightened around the crimson ribbon she still held. He rejected me before the entire pack. He said I embarrassed him, that no alpha deserved an omega as weak as me. Damien remained silent. Everyone watched. Her voice became quieter. Some laughed. Others looked away because they felt sorry for me. By sunrise, I had already been sent here. She laughed softly, though there was no joy in the sound. Quite an impressive life story, isn't it? Damien's silver eyes darkened. What was his name? Emily hesitated. Does it matter? Yes. Nathan Holloway. Damien repeated the name once, committing it to memory with unsettling ease. Emily noticed the subtle change in his expression. It lasted only a heartbeat, yet something inside his gaze had become dangerously cold. Somewhere far beyond the palace walls, an alpha named Nathan Holloway continued living his ordinary life, completely unaware that the most powerful king in the Northern Territories had just learned his name. Emily shifted uneasily. Your Majesty, why are you asking all of this? Damien looked directly into her eyes. Because nothing about your rejection makes sense anymore. What do you mean? Before he could answer, 3 firm knocks echoed against the locked study door. Both of them instinctively turned toward the sound. Your Majesty, came the respectful voice of an elderly man from outside. The royal physician has arrived for the council meeting. Damien remained perfectly still. The physician, perhaps there was one person capable of confirming whether he was losing his mind or witnessing something the kingdom had not seen in generations. His gaze slowly returned to Emily. Stay here. She frowned. Am I in trouble? Damien's expression softened almost imperceptibly. No. His answer came with absolute certainty. You're the mystery. Emily remained exactly where she stood, unable to tell whether the Alpha King had just protected her or imprisoned her. The locked study suddenly felt far larger than before, its towering bookshelves and dark stone walls fading into the background as Damien crossed the room toward the entrance. He unlocked the heavy oak door only enough to step outside, then quietly closed it behind him without inviting anyone else inside. Through the thick wood, Emily could hear muffled voices. Your Majesty, the elderly physician greeted respectfully. The council is waiting. It can wait. Damien's calm reply carried the kind of authority no one dared question. I require your professional opinion first. Moments later, the door opened again. Damien entered, followed by an elderly wolf whose silver hair rested neatly upon his shoulders. Deep wrinkles surrounded intelligent blue eyes that seemed to miss very little. The physician stopped immediately after seeing Emily. Surprise flashed across his face before years of discipline hit it once again. Damien secured the door a second time. Dr. Alden Whitmore, he said, I need you to examine something. The physician looked from the king to the nervous Omega standing near the fireplace. Her, Your Majesty? Not physically. Damien's silver eyes never left Emily. Tell me what you sense. Dr. Whitmore approached slowly, careful not to invade Emily's personal space. May I? He asked gently. Emily nodded. Unlike nearly everyone she had met since yesterday, the elderly physician's voice carried kindness instead of pity. He closed his eyes and inhaled carefully. Once, then again, his peaceful expression slowly changed into complete disbelief. He stepped backward. Impossible. Damien remained silent. You sense it too. It was not a question. Dr. Whitmore looked directly at the Alpha King. Your Majesty, where did you find this young woman? Emily blinked in confusion. I'm standing right here. The physician offered an apologetic smile. "Forgive me, Miss Carter." His attention immediately returned to Damien. This scent. He inhaled once more, his hands trembling almost imperceptibly. "I've practiced royal medicine for over 40 years. I've examined thousands of wolves. I've witnessed true mate bonds. I've studied forgotten bloodline records." His voice dropped into a whisper. "I've never encountered anything like this." Emily's heartbeat quickened. "Like what?" Neither man answered immediately. Damien folded his arms across his chest, forcing himself to remain composed despite the constant growl echoing beneath his skin. "Explain." Dr. Whitmore chose his words carefully. "Her scent is concealed." Emily frowned. Concealed? Almost as if someone, or something, suppressed its true nature for years. The physician slowly circled her once, not touching her. "What we smell now isn't an ordinary omega fragrance awakening." He looked toward Damien. "It's breaking through layers of concealment." The room became silent again. Emily searched both men's faces, desperately trying to understand. "I don't know what any of this means." Damien spoke first. "Neither did I until tonight." Dr. Whitmore adjusted his spectacles, still staring at Emily with growing fascination. "Miss Carter, has anyone in your family ever spoken about your ancestors?" Emily shook her head. "My parents died when I was very young." "Grandparents? I never knew them." "Family records?" She smiled sadly. "Our home burned down years ago. Everything was lost." The physician slowly exhaled. "Convenient." Emily stiffened. "Convenient. For someone hoping history would disappear." Damien's expression darkened. "You're suggesting this wasn't an accident." "I'm suggesting," Dr. Whitmore replied carefully, "that someone benefited from ensuring this young woman's true heritage remained unknown." Emily stared at him in stunned silence. Heritage? She had spent her entire life believing she came from an insignificant bloodline, a forgotten Omega family with no influence, no title, no future. Dr. Whitmore suddenly stepped closer to Damien and lowered his voice, though Emily still caught fragments of the conversation. "If I'm correct," the physician whispered, "the royal blood archives, the oldest genealogy scrolls." Damien's eyes sharpened immediately. "They still exist, locked beneath the original palace library, untouched for decades." The Alpha King looked back at Emily, whose pale face reflected nothing but confusion and growing fear. He finally understood why every instinct inside him had rejected the official records. The documents identifying Emily Carter as an ordinary rejected Omega had never told the whole story. Somewhere beneath Blackwood's citadel rested forgotten records capable of revealing who she truly was. And for the first time in many generations, Damien Blackwood realized someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase an entire bloodline from history. The silence inside the royal study lasted only a moment before a sharp series of knocks echoed through the heavy oak door. Unlike the respectful knock of the physician, this one carried urgency. "Your Majesty," a guard called from outside, his voice strained. "The Royal Council has assembled. Lord Victor insists the meeting cannot be delayed any longer." Damien never took his eyes off Emily. "Tell the council they will wait." A brief hesitation followed. "My lord, Lord Victor says the succession matter concerns the entire kingdom." Damien's expression hardened. "Then Lord Victor can learn patience." The footsteps outside retreated without another word. Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You postponed the royal council, because of me?" "Because of the truth," Damien corrected calmly. "Those are not the same thing." Dr. Alden Whitmore quietly gathered his medical satchel before stepping toward the king. "Your Majesty, if the ancient genealogy records still exist, they are stored beneath the first library." Damien nodded once. "Prepare the archive chamber. No one enters without my permission." Immediately, the physician bowed before leaving the study, carefully locking the door behind him once again. Now only Damien and Emily remained. The fire crackled softly between them. Emily lowered her eyes, struggling to process everything that had happened in the span of a single evening. Yesterday she had been rejected before her entire pack. Today the Alpha King himself had halted a royal council because someone believed her past had been stolen. Nothing felt real anymore. "Sit," Damien said quietly, gesturing toward a chair near the fireplace. Emily obeyed without argument. Her legs still felt weak. Damien remained standing beside the window, watching the moon slowly rise above the palace towers. You're frightened. Emily gave a faint laugh. Shouldn't I be? Probably. His honesty surprised her. But not because of me. She looked at him carefully. Then because of what? Damien was silent for several long moments. If Dr. Whitmore is correct, someone erased your history. Emily frowned. Why would anyone do that? Because bloodlines carry power. He finally turned toward her. Titles can be stolen. Lands can be conquered. But blood. His silver eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Blood creates legitimate heirs. Emily slowly shook her head. I'm nobody. That's what you've been told. Before she could answer, another voice echoed outside the study, louder this time. Your Majesty. Lord Victor's tone was cold and commanding despite the closed door. Open this door immediately. The council deserves an explanation. Damien sighed almost imperceptibly. Persistent. Without waiting for permission, the door handle suddenly rattled. Locked. Lord Victor spoke again. Reports say you have isolated yourself with an unknown rejected Omega. Emily's heart skipped. News had already spread. The nobles are asking questions. Damien's face became unreadable. Let them. If these rumors continue, confidence in the crown will suffer. A dangerous silence settled over the room. Emily instinctively rose from her chair. Maybe I should leave. Damien looked at her. Why? Because they're right. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm only a rejected Omega. I shouldn't be here. I'm causing trouble for you. For the first time since they had met, something almost resembling sadness crossed Damien's face. Emily, hearing her name spoken so gently by the Alpha King, caught her completely off guard. Do you know what every person outside this room believes? She slowly shook her head. They believe you're insignificant. Her eyes lowered. Maybe they are. Damien took one deliberate step toward her. I don't. Emily looked up. Their eyes met again, but this time she found no terrifying pressure waiting for her. Only certainty. From the moment you walked into this palace, Damien continued quietly. Nothing has followed the rules I have trusted my entire life. He paused. That means either fate has made a mistake. His wolf stirred beneath his calm exterior, no longer roaring in blind possession, but standing with unwavering conviction. Or everyone else has. Before Emily could answer, the heavy study doors shook violently beneath a powerful impact from the corridor outside. Another voice joined Lord Victor's, louder and angrier than before. Your Majesty, someone shouted. The council demands that the Omega be surrendered for questioning immediately. Damien slowly turned toward the door. His silver eyes became ice. They've made their choice, he murmured. Then, without raising his voice, the Alpha King spoke words that would change the balance of the entire kingdom. Now they'll hear mine. The study doors swung open with a thunderous crash before anyone outside could force them apart. Damien Blackwood stepped into the corridor first, his black coat flowing behind him like a shadow given life. Emily remained just inside the doorway, instinctively shrinking from the dozens of eyes that immediately turned toward her. Nobles, advisors, royal guards, and council elders lined the marble hall in absolute silence. Lord Victor Ashcroft stood at their head, his silver-trimmed robes marking decades of political authority. His cold gray eyes swept over Emily with open contempt before settling on the Alpha King. Your Majesty, Victor said stiffly. The kingdom deserves an explanation. Damien descended the first marble step without haste. About what? About the rejected Omega hidden inside your private study. Whispers rippled through the gathered nobles. Emily lowered her gaze. The familiar weight of judgment settled over her shoulders once again. She recognized those looks. She had endured them her entire life. Damien noticed every single one. No one was hidden, he replied evenly. She remained where I instructed her to remain. Victor folded his hands behind his back. With respect, Your Majesty, an unknown Omega has no place inside the king's private chambers. Damien's expression remained perfectly calm. She entered under my command. Then perhaps Your Majesty has allowed emotion to cloud your judgment. Several council members exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke to the Alpha King so directly. Emily's heart raced. She wanted to disappear before the confrontation grew worse. Quietly, she stepped toward the side corridor, hoping no one would notice. Stop. Damien's voice reached her before she had taken a third step. She froze immediately. Every noble turned to watch her. Damien slowly looked toward the gathered council. No one here will address Miss Emily Carter without my permission. The hallway fell completely silent. Lord Victor's face hardened. Miss Carter, he repeated, you grant a discarded Omega formal respect. I grant respect where it is deserved. Victor took one measured step forward. Then allow the council to question her. If she has nothing to hide, she has nothing to fear. Emily instinctively clasped her trembling hands together. Damien answered before she could speak. She answers to no one tonight. Murmurs spread once more. One elderly counselor finally found the courage to speak. Your Majesty, rumors are already spreading throughout the palace. Some servants claim your wolf reacted to her scent. Damien neither confirmed nor denied the statement. His silence only intensified the whispers. Victor seized the opportunity. Exactly why she must be examined before this becomes a threat to the crown. Emily looked toward Damien. It's all right, she whispered. If answering questions will help. No. His response came immediately. You owe them nothing. Something inside Emily's chest tightened. Nobody had ever defended her before. Not during yesterday's rejection. Not when her own pack laughed. Not once in her entire life. Yet the most powerful alpha alive stood between her and an entire kingdom without the slightest hesitation. Lord Victor's patience finally snapped. Your Majesty, he barked. The throne does not belong to instinct alone. It belongs to law. Damien slowly turned toward him. You're correct. Every voice vanished. Then follow the law, Victor demanded. Present the Omega before the council. Damien descended the final step until he stood face to face with the elder statesman. Neither man looked away. You misunderstand something, Victor. His voice remained calm, but the temperature throughout the corridor seemed to drop. The law serves the crown. He paused. The crown does not serve fear. Victor's jaw tightened. Are you refusing the council? I'm refusing ignorance. At that exact moment, hurried footsteps echoed from the opposite end of the corridor. Dr. Alden Whitmore appeared carrying an ancient wooden case secured with iron clasps. His breathing was uneven from rushing. Your Majesty, he called. Every head turned toward him. The elderly physician stopped before Damien and carefully opened the weathered case. Inside rested a single parchment scroll wrapped in faded blue silk, bearing the royal seal of an age long forgotten. Dust rose into the moonlit air as the physician looked directly at the Alpha King. We found it, he said quietly. The first blood registry. Even Lord Victor's confident expression faltered. Dr. Whitmore swallowed once before adding the words that sent a chill through every noble in the corridor. And Miss Emily Carter's family name appears in the royal bloodline itself. Emily stared at the ancient scroll as though it belonged to someone else. That's impossible, she whispered. Dr. Alden Whitmore carefully unrolled the brittle parchment, revealing elegant names written in faded silver ink beneath the crest of the first Alpha dynasty. His finger stopped beside a line that had been partially scratched away centuries ago. The House of Evermont, he said softly. A royal bloodline believed to have vanished nearly 200 years ago. Every noble in the corridor leaned forward in stunned silence. Lord Victor's confident expression finally cracked. No, he said sharply. Those records were declared extinct. Declared, the physician replied. Calmly, not proven. Damien accepted the scroll with both hands, reading every weathered line himself. The more he read, the quieter he became. Emily watched uncertainty pass across his face for the first time since they had met. Your Majesty? She asked cautiously. Damien lifted his eyes to hers. Your family was never erased by fate. His voice carried quiet certainty. They were erased by people. A heavy silence settled over the royal corridor. Emily's knees nearly gave way. Her entire life, she had believed she was insignificant, unwanted, and forgotten. Every insult, every rejection, every whispered rumor had convinced her she deserved nothing more than survival. Yet the truth standing before her shattered every lie she had ever accepted. Tears gathered in her eyes before she could stop them. Then, who am I? Damien slowly crossed the remaining distance between them. There was no overwhelming alpha aura now, no terrifying pressure, only calm strength. He stopped close enough for her to see the warmth hidden behind his silver eyes. You're Emily Carter, he said gently, and no stolen history can change the woman you've chosen to become. She looked at him through blurred vision. But everyone hated me. Not everyone. Damien reached out carefully, giving her every chance to step away. When she didn't, he lightly brushed away a single tear with the back of his fingers. The strongest thing you did was remain kind after the world gave you every reason not to be. Around them, the nobles lowered their eyes in uneasy silence. None of them had ever witnessed their king speak so gently to another person. Damien turned toward the council, his expression becoming regal once more. "Hear my decree." Every voice disappeared. "Emily Carter will remain under my direct protection." Lord Victor inhaled sharply, preparing to object. Damien raised one hand, and the elder immediately fell silent. "Until every page of her family's history has been restored, no one will question, accuse, or threaten her." His gaze swept across every face in the corridor. "Any challenge to that order is a challenge to the crown itself." One by one, the council members bowed. Even Lord Victor, though reluctant, lowered his head in obedience. Emily watched in disbelief as the same world that would have ignored her yesterday now stood in respectful silence, because someone powerful had chosen justice over prejudice. Damien looked back at her, and for the first time since entering Blackwood Citadel, she smiled without forcing it. It was small, fragile, and beautifully genuine. His wolf stirred peacefully beneath his heart, no longer roaring in restless possession, but resting in absolute certainty. "Mine," it whispered, not as a command, as a promise to protect. Emily did not hear the word, but somehow she felt its meaning. Together they stepped onto the palace balcony overlooking the sleeping kingdom. The full moon hung high above the mountains, bathing the stone towers in silver light. The cold night breeze carried away the last echoes of yesterday's humiliation. Beside her stood not only the most powerful alpha alive, but the first person who had ever seen her worth before learning her name, her bloodline, or her past. Damien looked toward the endless horizon before quietly saying, "The first person who ever called me handsome changed my destiny." Emily laughed softly through lingering tears. "I only told the truth." For the first time in countless years, the Alpha King smiled. It was small enough that only she would ever notice, yet warm enough to change the entire night. Above them, the moon shone brighter than either of them remembered, as though the goddess herself had waited patiently for justice to find two lonely souls at exactly the right moment. And while the kingdom believed a forgotten bloodline had finally returned, Damien and Emily understood a far simpler truth. Real strength had never begun with power. It had begun the moment a rejected Omega chose kindness instead of bitterness, and a lonely Alpha King finally found someone whose honest heart saw the man before the crown.